and welcome to the MIT IoT Seminar Series. It is my great pleasure today to host Professor Ehsan Hoque from the University of Rochester. He is an associate professor of computer science, where he co-leads the Rochester HCI Human-Computer Interaction Group. Professor Hoque is also an alum of the MIT Media Lab. Him and I overlapped actually at MIT, and I was always very fond of his work. It's wonderful to see him back here to give us a talk, and he's done some amazing work over the past few years. I'm very excited to talk today. I'm just going to be listing a little bit of what he's done just to give a sense. So from 2018 to 2019, he was also the interim director of the Georgian Institute of Data Science. He received his PhD from the Media Lab in 2013, where the MIT Museum highlighted his dissertation. He also built the work and patent on the presenter coach, which Microsoft released in 2019 which will be integrated in PowerPoint. I actually saw the news, on Microsoft, and it reminded me of your work, but I did not know that it was a direct integration of your work. So that is wonderful. And he's known for a lot of his pioneering work in using AI to train and enhance elements of basic human ability. He and his students' work has won so many career awards, especially early career awards, including the NSF Career Award. He was named by MIT's Technology Review as one of the world's top 35 innovators under 35, and he's won the ARO Research Award. He was recognized as one of the top 10 scientists to watch in 2017, and in 2020, the National Academy of Medicine recognized him as one of the future leaders in health and medicine. So many awards and honors. Very excited about your talk, and thank you for creating a talk just for us today. I'm sure a lot of us are looking forward to it. And with this, the screen is yours. And if you want to mute yourself, and I'll mute myself.
It's glad to be here, and I know that I myself is burned out of the semester. So people who are here on the call, I really appreciate you being here. And I'm hoping for this talk to be a bit engaging. And I have a few live demos, so if it works, so you hopefully can have some fun together. So I'll start my talk by asking you a question, and you feel free to type on the chat. So babies that are born in this decade have 50% chance of living until how long? Can anybody guess? 95, Patrick said 95, G said 100. Fadil said 80, so I do see a spectrum here, so I'll give you the answer. So there's no one answer, but depending on which country you look, pretty much all the countries, they say it's probably going to live 100 or more. And that is very exciting because long life is a gift. Now let's go back to 100 years and ask the same question. The probability of somebody who was born in 1921 and they'll live up to 100 was, what would be the probability of somebody who was born in 1920 living up to 100? Fadil said 5, it's actually 1%. So in the last 100 years, we've made great progress to bump that probability to 50%. And in case it's not clear, the reason we have done well, because we tackle infant mortality. We looked into tackling chronic diseases like middle age, cancer, as well as very cardiovascular diseases. We have eliminated many infectious diseases like TB, smallpox, and many things. So that's a great progress. So the question is, what are the next challenge for the next few decades? And many would argue that tackling the disease of the old age would be something that we need to work towards. People are living longer, they're going to have diseases they never had before, and we need to be able to ready to deal with that. And in my talk, there are two things I'm going to argue that are important. Number one is compression of morbidity. So what does it mean? Let me show an example here. So here, let me have the highlighter. So here, this is what's happening. Somebody is born, they die at 75, they get disease somewhere here, and this is where the quality of life goes bad and they die over here. If we keep it the way it is, this is what would happen. right? So instead of living up to 75, people would live up to 80. They would get sick at the same point, and they would suffer longer. The compression of morbidity is like, okay, people are going to get sick, but perhaps we can push that needle a little bit. Or if they get sick, they should be able to manage their symptom really well. And then in the end, they should suffer. So that's exactly, it's not a new idea, but that's exactly what we are aiming towards by using technology. And the second point is equity. If there's one thing you can see here among these countries, there's one thing that's common, that they're all from developed countries. The stat for developing countries is not as bright as this. So that's one source of inequity. And if you look at United States itself, so this is a graph. Here, x-axis correspond to GDP, and y-axis correspond to life expectancy. So you can see USA have done really well on bumping up the GDP, but then compared to other countries, the life expectancy hasn't gone up. And that is a problem. And if you look carefully at the data, you notice that individuals from certain socioeconomic background or certain racial background have the life expectancy up, but not so much for other individuals. So the discrepancy is really widening. So we need to be able to acknowledge that's happening and find a way to innovate so that we can narrow that gap and make sure that our technology is able to be used by everybody as people are living longer. So hopefully by this time I've convinced you that this is an exciting area of research to move towards. But for my talk, let's be a bit more narrow. So it's not just about aging well, but aging equitably. What do I mean by this? So let me define some scope that I'll cover in today's talk. We all know that older adults, the way they engage with technology, the way they trust, is very different than the way others would do it. Whenever you build any kind of technology, it's important that we include individuals with disability as a priority group, because that gives us new insight and that results in making better product. In typical machine learning, you build the algorithm in a lab setting, and then you find a way to deploy it, and you have many checks and balances in place to ensure that your algorithms are working well. So in my talk, I'll give some example as to how do you think about the deployment in your development phase and use that to drive the algorithm forward. And what happens when you do that? And if it works well, I'll give you 2 examples of our work where you are able to deploy this technology and give live demos. So this is the landscape of my talk. So first I'll talk about neurological care available anytime, anywhere. There is a disease called neurodegenerative diseases. They're associated with brain and linked with aging. And among them, the fastest growing is Parkinson. So today I'll talk about is there is a way for people to manage their symptom as well as manage the progression of the disease using IoT technologies. National Cancer Institute predicts that 40% of US population will have invasive cancer in their lifetime. And nearly half of them will die of the disease. So at point of the time, they will have to make a decision whether they want to pursue the aggressive chemo or to stop the treatment. And they will rely on the counseling of the oncologist. And this is really difficult conversation for a counselor to be able to, or doctors to be able to provide information. So I'll give you some more details about what happens in this conversation when there's a miscommunication occur and if there's a role for technology to improve that. And if there's a time, I'll talk about one other project we have taken on, aging and engaging elderly who are isolated, let's say due to COVID, they lose touch on social skills. If there is a way for AI to go in and improve some of their social skills through coaching. So that's a landscape of today's talk, and this is me. Before I get into the meat of the talk, let me just go back into my student days as I was a student, just like yourself, not so long ago. So my PhD thesis was about building piece of technology or an avatar that would give feedback on students' interviewing skills. And this was inspired by helping individuals who may have Asperger's syndrome and have severe social difficulty. So after I graduated, MIT Tech Review ran a press article on the work. And to date, we have received close to 6,000 emails from the general public saying that this is great. How do I use it? So after I became a faculty, we built an online version of this. So imagine now you have access to training, public speaking training via cloud. We call it RockSpeak, where anybody from any part of the world can go to the website, turn on your webcam, and practice giving a speech. So let me play a quick video, and I forgot to enable the sounds. I'm going to do that again.
What do you think people fear the most? Statistics from the National Institute of Mental Health show that public speaking is the greatest fear that people have, even greater than the fear of death. A lot of people want to improve their public speaking skills, but due to fear, social stigma, and lack of resources, they don't know where to begin. What if you could practice public speaking in the privacy of your own home and receive personalized, automated, and respectful feedback? We present RockSpeak, a semi-automated framework that provides exactly that. Here's how to use it. Just head over to the RockSpeak website and enable your camera and microphone to record yourself. Worried about privacy? Record with private mode, where your data won't be saved beyond the duration of your practice session. Once you finish recording, your feedback is being processed in the cloud while the video uploads. When it's done, you can see a set of tabs filled with your automated feedback generated using computerized algorithms. Automated feedback includes visual and audio features such as graphs of smile intensity, body movement, volume modulation, pitch variation, filler words, total versus unique words spoken, word recognition confidence, a transcript, and word cloud.
All right, so that was a fun project. We had a lot of fun. And when I did my PhD at Media Lab filed a patent that got licensed by Microsoft. Now, as I am using PowerPoint to give this feedback, I could potentially use the system that built to get myself feedback on how well I'm speaking and engaging with the audience. So that was nice. And then down the road, we also looked into how can people work in an online environment, build a network, and based on how they interact with each other, can they improve their creative ability? So in a typical setting, this would have been the talk that I would give. But today I'm going to try something different. As I came back to Media Lab, where I started, I will tell a story and kind of go about the work that I've taken on the last couple of years. So when I was a PhD student, I started in 2007. I heard that within first month of a PhD, I heard that my mother has final stage cancer patients. And at the time, my advisor said, oh, you know what? It's fine. Take off from the PhD program. Go take care of your mother. So I was able to take a leave for 1 year. And it was nice to be able to spend time with her, take care of her. On the other end, it also gave me perspective about what it likes to be a caregiver and deal with the medical system. So that gave me a very unique perspective. And when my mother passed away in 2008, she left our brother behind, and he was born with Down syndrome and later diagnosed with autism. And I became his caregiver. He's 21 now. This is our picture a few weeks ago. So in case you're wondering why I took on the project on helping individuals with social skills, my brother was one of the motivations for it. Now let's go back to my mother. She had final stage cancer. And when she passed away, she was going through the third line of chemotherapy. And the doctors kept on saying us, you know what, she has extensive disease. Every day is special. We completely misread the cue and kept on pushing aggressive chemo. And that had severe impact on our quality of life. One of the side effects of chemotherapy was involuntary tremor of our body. So after several weeks of effort, we talked to a neurologist, and the neurologist gave us a medication called levodopa to manage the tremor. And after taking the medication, the tremor went away, and we were so happy. And we never saw the neurologist because it takes a lot of effort to go see the person. But after a couple of months, the medication stopped working. So I came back and finished my PhD, but those two things stayed in my mind. And today I'm happy to share that in the last couple of years, I've been fortunate to find the right set of collaborators to take on these problems of end-of-life communication, as well as Parkinson. And today I can share some exciting results as well as live demo. So this is a landscape again. So let's dive right to it. So a couple of years ago, I saw a neurologist in our university, Ray Dorsey, who is a hotshot faculty, wrote the book called Ending Parkinson Disease. I made an appointment with him. And the first thing he did was he took a huge book and threw it on the table. So it said that that's the Bible of Parkinson. Everything is pen and paper based. Any automation that you can bring into the equation will be a contribution. In fact, this is a slide that I borrowed from him, and that talks about the role of IoT to potentially transform Parkinson. Right now, the only thing we look at is when the patient come to the clinic and perform the neurological test. But there are many things that are missing out right now that the neurologists don't have access to, but could potentially change the way we treat Parkinson. In case you don't know about Parkinson's disease, it's a neurological disability. It's the fastest growing. It's growing faster than Alzheimer. Right now, there are 10 million people with Parkinson, and it's expected to double by 2040. There's no cure available. The best possible treatment that's out there is 50 years old and offers many side effects. Imagine 23 African countries, 1 neurologist, and 6 million individuals. So there is no way that can scale up unless we introduce technology here. In the United States, 40% of individuals who have Parkinson over 65 do not see a doctor or receive care. So we feel that we can probably do better. Let me give an analogy here. So everybody knows about diabetes, right? So if you have diabetes, you would buy a device, and using that, you can measure your glucose level as many times as you wish, right? So imagine diabetes 50 years ago, where you'd have to go to a clinic to have your blood drawn and measure the glucose. That's where Parkinson is today. And we believe with all the innovations we have had over the years, it's time for a change. In fact, these are the different papers that you can see that has transformed diabetes research from IoT community. So what's our vision? So imagine anybody who has access to a website can go to a website, call it parktest.net, turn on their webcam, and perform the set of neurological tests. Now, there is one limitation here, which is many of these individuals are so severe, they can only use the mouse or maybe the space bar. And how would they really go about performing the entire test? So there's a lot of innovation involved to see how people could do all of that. So imagine this individual's performing the typical neurological test, but in front of a computer, and whereas using computer vision and machine learning technique, we can quantify many of these tremors and give them feedback, as well as share the data with a neurologist. So what's the big picture? So individuals with Parkinson's disease go to the website, follow instructions, and get feedback. And there are many different kinds of tasks that's out there that involves many parts of the body. So let me show you some videos that we have collected from individuals' environment. These are fist open and close. These are all individuals who have Parkinson. This is one of the tasks, pronation, supination. Postural tremor, one more task they do in front of a doctor, but now they can do this in front of a computer. We have some task on facial expression. This is a disgusted face. Just to be able to measure their muscle movement, how modular their muscle movements. So these are all standard neurological tests.
1, 2, 3.
There are also tasks involving the head. So from that task, we've applied many different tricks. And today I'll tell you all about it, except the eye gaze that's ongoing. And then we have a feedback page that can take the data and provide some feedback to the participant that can quantify the quality or the severity of the tremor. So if you have seen the videos, it's pretty clear the challenges are there, right? So if you look at the videos, what are the challenges you can think about? They are not uniformed. There are lighting conditions that are different, hands moving out of the camera, so you can really track them well. People often don't follow the instructions. They're asked to do this 10 times, but they will do it 8 times or maybe 12 times. The camera angles are all over the place, right? So that's challenging. And in machine learning, this is what you deal with. This is a training set, which is perfect and works really well. But when they deploy this in the real world, this is what you deal with. So you need to be able to ready for that. Now, in typical machine learning, people have been talking about, okay, we deploy or we build some algorithms in the lab environment, and we deploy this. And when they deploy this, we're going to put some typical checks and balances in place to make sure that data set doesn't shift. We can do many tricks to make sure that we can still get the same accuracy that we have received in a lab environment. And this is a work from Suchisaria, who is also part of the NIH grant that fund our Parkinson work. And there's one line in their paper to talk about, and rightly so, that unrealistic to assume that the data from all possible deployment settings are available upfront. And we ask, what if we could? And in the next few slides, I'll show you some examples that were using principles of human-centered computing and pushing the boundary of IoT, it may be possible to get some data from the deployment environment and use that to train your algorithm and find a way to deploy it back again and see what happens. So at least for the application we have tested, I have some results that I can show you using this method. So people who work on computer vision know that the state-of-the-art computer vision is called open pose. So this is a fun video.
Oppan Gangnam Style. Gangnam Style. Oppan Gangnam Style.
On the data that we have collected. So this is an individual who doesn't have Parkinson, healthy, following the instructions. So for that data, it worked fairly well and we're pretty happy. And then we started to try on real patients, and you see it doesn't work as expected. There's a lot of noise. There's a female doing the same task. It's tracking the person in the back, not tracking the hand at all. And we tried the media pipe as well, which is the latest computer vision technology from Google, and also failed miserably on the data that we have. So in the next few slides, I'll show you of some of the tricks we have tried on many different tasks. And each of the slide is one paper, so I'm not going to be able to go deep into it, but happy to engage during Q&A if you have questions. So here, this is motor symptom analysis. They're doing motor task. So for there, we have, let's say, a video of a person performing the task. We need to be able to segment the relevant component, because in the beginning, they would go and click on Start Webcam and do the task. And once they're done, they'll go find that webcam again and click Stop. So we need to be able to at least delete the irrelevant segment here and here. So you can do that automatically. And then we can do a spatial segmentation where you blow out the background so that we can only deal with the person as they're performing the task. And then we tried something simple, which is something called motion magnification, where imagine if I have a pixel and I multiply it by 10, 50, or 100, or maybe 500. And once I start magnifying the area, I start to see patterns or movements that was otherwise not noticeable. So when you try motion magnification, then try some fast Fourier transformation, we can actually do a fairly good job in classifying between Parkinson and not Parkinson with 91% accuracy on the motor task. So this is one other task on head movement. Anybody knows who this is? This is Michael J. Fox, who had Parkinson at the age of 28. So here he's not even speaking, and you can see the movement that he's having, especially on the head. So from there, we had this intuition is that what if we could start analyzing the head movement, and perhaps there might be something there that's indicative of early Parkinson. So in terms of framework, we have this video. From there, we can do a fairly good job in tracking the head pose in X direction, Y direction, as well as Z direction, the depth. And you can plot it through time. And let's say we can apply fast Fourier transformation on them and do some tricks there. And then from there, we can find out which of these dimensions is most indicative of Parkinson. Any guess from the audience? As there are 6 channels here, TX, TY, TZ, RX, RY, and RZ. One of the channels has some unique information about Parkinson. Can anybody guess which one? It's not intuitive, but perhaps you can guess, but it's actually the TX, which is going in the X direction. So how people are moving their head in a subtle way in a video reveals a lot of information, whether they're showing early signs of Parkinson's or not. And we can do a fairly good job in picking that up. There is one other trick we have done on facial expressions. So here, people are asked to produce these 3 expressions. And I'm gonna plot smile. So AU stands for action unit, which is lip corner pull, this one. So as people are pulling their lips, we can track that movement fairly well. And you can say this is, my laser pointer, this is individuals who don't have PD. This is where they're smiling, they go up here, and they stop smiling, go to the neutral, and then start smiling again. And you see the same thing for individuals who have Parkinson. You can see they started smiling, and then go, and not smiling. So you can clearly see there's a difference. And when I started talking with neurologist friends, they said, this means that individuals with non-PD have a lot more modularity the way they control their facial expressions. That's why you see a lot of subtlety in non-PD. Whereas individuals with PD, they are very rigid with their expression. So one possibility that we felt excited about is that these days, people take a lot of selfies. And when you take a selfie, what do? You get your phone and then look at it, right? And then you start to smile. And the phone is very clever. The phone doesn't really take a frame. It takes a video, a couple of seconds long. And from that video, it grabs the appropriate frame and shows it to you to make you happy. As people are taking millions of selfies every day, the phones are creating a few seconds long videos, and most of them may contain smiling. So imagine with participants' consent, the phone or the algorithm can automatically analyze how they're smiling and give people early indication that, you know what, you might be showing signs of Parkinson, you may want to see a neurologist. So that would be a very, very passive way of giving people feedback of in case they're showing early signs. So by using many of these expressions, you can do a fairly good job in tracking whether they're Parkinson's or not. And in our ongoing work, we are also looking into quantifying the severity of the symptom. It's not just about recognizing whether they have Parkinson's or not, if somebody has Parkinson, we want to measure the severity of the symptom, which ranges from 0 to 4. 0 means no severity, 4 means very severe. So you also want to be able to quantify it. This is a task where people are saying a sentence.
The quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog. The dog wakes up and follows the fox into the forest. But again, the quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog.
And in case it's not clear, it's a pangram. So that includes all the alphabets in the English language. So one thing you notice that when I notice individuals with Parkinson, by the time they get to this sentence, they're repeating it, something different that we can quantify about their breathing, the way they breathe, the way they pause. And by using this, we can do a fairly good job in classifying whether they may have Parkinson's or not. So these are the many different tricks we have tried. So what I want to do is, we have an online version of this where I'm going to go online and perform 4 of the tests, and the site can tell me whether I have Parkinson's or not with some probability. So let's try that today and see if it works. And looks like How answered the question accurately. TX, that was correct. Yes, thank you. So this is the site. Let me make it bigger. So I'm here, let's say. So there are 2 applications for this. One is, let's say if somebody lives in a remote place, but there might be showing early signs of Parkinson, they could come here and perform a test and get a referral. And the second use case is, if I do have Parkinson, I want to be able to measure its severity between taking medication, which now requires an in-person visit to the clinic. But now I can do this just by going to the website from my home. So I can do this multiple times a day, be able to see how well I'm responding to the medication. And that's very critical because the medication that we have, levodopa, will stop working if we don't fine-tune the dosage. And in order for doctor to fine-tune them, doctor needs to know how well they're responding to the medication. And it's only possible if they come to the clinic. So by introducing some kind of framework that's on the cloud, doctors now will have access to information to fine-tune the dosage so that medication continues to work for a longer duration. All right, so let's try this here. So
in this task, you will make the biggest smile that you can, alternating with a neutral face, and you will do that 3 times, like this.
All right, so let me do that. My other camera should. All right, so that's done.
In this task, you will make the most disgusted face that you can, alternating with a neutral face. And you will repeat this 3 times, like this.
Okay, let me do the disgusted face.
In this task, you will move your eyebrows up as high as you can, and then down as low as you can, 3 times slowly, like this.
Okay, so let's do that. Last one.
The second part of the first task, make sure your face is still within the record frame and just recite this sentence. The quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog. The dog wakes up and follows the fox into the forest. But again, the quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog.
All right, so let's do that. The quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog. The dog wakes up and follows the fox into the forest. But again, the quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog. All right, I'm done. I just hit on analysis. It's going in the cloud. Let me just take a look, see what's going on. So that shows me live view. So it's upload, extracting the information from the facial features. Then we'll extract information from the audio, invoke the prediction engine, and make a prediction. So the parktest.net website that we have, that's online. So using that framework, we collected close to 1,000 data points from individuals without Parkinson and around 500 individuals with Parkinson, which is by far the largest data set ever collected on this. And they're all over the world, especially the United States. They don't have to come to the clinic, so they can just go to the website. So that way we're getting a diversity of data. People are doing this in their own environment. So that gives a very unique data set. And from the data set, we modeled the algorithm we want to do and invoked a prediction engine that can give me a probability at this time. Hopefully this will work and I will get some output. Live demo is always tricky. And our next step is to be able to not only give a probability, but also give a severity score. And I also want to clarify that this demo is only for computer scientists, where we show how it's working and how the classifier is making a decision. This is not for giving feedback to individuals to the patients or to the doctors. So the probability came in from the facial. It thinks there's a 2% probability I may have Parkinson, which is fairly low. The speech is fairly noisy, so it had a higher probability. And when you take the average, it's 9%, which is fairly low for me. I think what right now we are working on with the neurologist is that, okay, how do I take this 9% and say it in a language so people who are taking the test understand? How do I tell them that, that's legally allowed, that you need to go and seek a referral right now? So that's all ongoing work. And also thinking through how to give this feedback to the neurologist. So that's another layer of HCI work that needs to be done. But at least we have the entire prediction engine online working, and we're adding more features to it every day. I don't see any questions, so I'm going to move on. So this is part of a larger NIH grant in which we have a center, and we were pushing this work for the next couple of years. In fact, Dina Katabi from MIT is also part of the center. So we've been very fortunate to get a great set of people to work on that mission. Now, I talked about neurodegenerative diseases. Parkinson is the fastest growing, but there are also other family of diseases like ataxia, Huntington, progressive supranuclear palsy, and multiple systems atrophy. So they all have very similar symptoms that we can model. And also some of the symptoms are subtly different. So there is a big technical challenge of, okay, how do I build an algorithm that can understand some of those movements or patterns in a unique way, also be able to understand when the pattern belongs to a certain disease. Because due to the similarity, often individuals who might be showing ataxia get mislabeled by Parkinson. So a lot of things are happening. So that's an ongoing work. Right now, we're working with Houston Methodist School to look into ataxia. We also have a center in the University of Rochester in Huntington. So our big pie in the sky goal is to be able to have a framework where we are able to not only support individuals with this Parkinson or any of this condition and measure the severity of the disease, also we can classify them as to which bucket they belong. All right, so that's the one I was going to talk about, and I'm going to briefly talk about end-of-life communication. I want to wrap it up in the next 6 minutes so that there's enough time for questions. So end-of-life communication. So I'm going to ask a question, and I want to see some responses here. So what percentage of final stage cancer patients leave doctor's office without understanding the prognosis? Any guesses by anybody on the chat? 60, G said 50. Okay. 90, all right, 90 is too high. It's actually 68, so Patrick is closer. So why is it difficult? I mean, I've lived through this myself. It's very difficult for patients to be able to admit, and then they're in denial, then they bargain, and they turn to acceptance. So it's oncologists need to be able to understand all of that, follow along, show empathy, and be able to answer questions and help them understand their prognosis. And these are very, very difficult skills. So we have been fortunate to work with our oncology department to model this. especially understand that, okay, in this kind of end of life communication, when does communication go bad and why? Then how do you study this? So we set up a study where we recruited 400 individuals with end of life cancer. They all have died by now, and 40 oncologists. And they do counseling. And we have their audio data and transcript. Now the question is, okay, we have all this data. How do you know that this counseling went well versus other counseling didn't go well? How do you know what's good, what's bad? So we tried something simple, like we had some questions for the doctors as well as for the patient. For the patient, we asked them a question, like, what do you believe your doctor thinks that there are chances that you'll live for 2 years or more? And we ask a similar question to the doctor, like, what do you believe are the chances that this patient will live for 2 years or more, right? So, and here by subtracting what doctor thinks and what patient thinks doctor thinks, you can get discordance. When the discordance score is high, that means there is a discrepancy between what the doctor thinks, what the patient thinks. And using this metric, we can now classify, at least bucket 2 kinds of communication. In one, there was a good communication, information was transferred, both were on the same page. And in the other case, there was a miscommunication. And once you have that, then we start to analyze the pattern and learn to see, okay, is there something that I can quantify? So given the time that I have, I'll give you the punchline. So we find 2 things. When the doctor lectures the patient, that's when the prognosis go down. And also we notice that the doctors that use dynamic sentiment, like start with a positive note and end with a positive note, were able to get the information across. I have a live demo, so let's see if this will work. Let me get this here. So this is a virtual patient. Maybe it froze, I don't know. So in case it.
Hi, my name is Sophie. I am a computer character. I may sound choppy, but I am still able to have a conversation with you. I just moved back into the area from Florida about 2 weeks ago. I was recently diagnosed with lung cancer and finished radiation about a month ago. My pain seemed to be under control for a while, but it seems to be getting worse now. I'm meeting with you today to help get some questions answered about my options and my future. One thing I've noticed in the last few weeks is that I haven't been sleeping very well. Most nights I have to take medication for my pain. I'm not sure if it's only the pain, but I keep waking up at night. Do you know why I keep waking up like this?
It could be due to the medication you were having. People who have taken this medication have experienced similar symptoms in the past.
I see. It seems like my pain is the root of my sleeping problems. Do you think having stronger pain medication would help with that?
With your reaction to the chemotherapy, I'm kind of worried that it might be time for you to take pain medication.
I see. You know, I'm in a lot of pain, and the lower tab just isn't working. I think maybe I need something stronger for my pain.
So I'll stop the video here due to the time, but counseling goes in for 20 minutes. It's a long conversation where they probe on many different things. So this is what the doctor would see. And this is also based on what the doctors told us are important to them. So they get feedback on speaking rate. Doctors are supposed to ask a lot of questions. So we give them feedback on what kind of question they're asking and where the questions are appearing. And also, it's very important to ask open-ended questions, which often doctors forget to do so. So we can also give them feedback on the open-ended questions. And this is red means this is where they were lecturing the patient. So the doctors can immediately see, okay, this is where I was lecturing and perhaps I shouldn't. And this is an example of taking turns. And we also want to give people doctors feedback that this is where you could have asked an open-ended question, or this is where you could ask a probing question, or maybe some kind of follow-up question to show your empathy. So giving some kind of feedback to the doctor saying that this is how you could further improve your interaction with the patient. So the entire framework is online and could be incorporated with the training system, especially in the medical school where communication training only happens in the first year and that's it. So having some kind of training like this where people can do this whenever they want would be very valuable to them. So it's 3:51 right now, so I will end it right here because I want to have enough time for questions. So I will go back to here. So this is, I'm not going to talk about that, but I'm going to acknowledge my team who does all the work and gives me the opportunity to present here. And on that note, I'll open up the floor for questions.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Ehsan, for a very inspiring talk. I will also, if folks want to ask questions, they can now unmute themselves and then ask the question. There was also a question in the chat, which I can start with. Matt asked, given that I think in the last demo it's a recording, he's curious as to why you chose to have the voice sound choppy like an AI rather than sound like a person.
I think it's the reality of the AI right now. It's dynamic, it's doing language understanding. If we use recorded voice, we're going to be limited to what we have recording for. I think this is the state of the art of voice synthesis. So that's one limitation. The other consideration is we want to lower the expectation. It's not a real patient. It's just something that's choppy and it acknowledges right away, you know what, I am just a character. I'm choppy, just deal with it and get on with the practice. So we want to lower the expectation from the very beginning.
Great. Gia?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for this presentation. It's fascinating and it gives us a lot of hope. If I may, I wanted to share that unfortunately, my mother was diagnosed with PSP 10 years ago, and she recently passed away. So I wish we, had something like this to help us diagnose her earlier. But anyway, I wanted to find out, in your mind, what are the next steps or milestones to make this technology sort of, get to the clinical front to be used by doctors and patients?
Right. Well, I'm sorry to hear about your mother. I hope you're feeling better now. Going back to the question, in both of our, in fact, all of these projects, we have been very fortunate to work with medical professionals to begin with. So it's not just, okay, we have some data, let's crank on it, publish a paper, and once you have great results, let's find somebody else who would want to use this. It's quite the opposite, where we work with a collaborator. They tell us, this is how I'm doing this. This is where a technology could be useful. And by just working with them, and it requires a lot of patience and effort to work with them because they often don't understand the limitation of the technology. So at least in the neurology and end of life, we are directly working with the neurology as well as the oncology department. And we're hopeful that we have medical partners who would be willing to incorporate this in their daily life practice, because we are getting the feedback on every single thing that we are adding. So your question is how soon? We don't know yet. The grant for Parkinson is, we have 2 more years left, and I'm hoping that within the 2-year time span, we may have a system that neurologists may be willing to use.
Can I just quickly follow up? So from the sounds of it, it sounds like if you could, in the interim, recruit a lot more neurologists to try out your system and to give you feedback or to provide you with more data, the faster you can develop and refine the system. Is it fair to assume that?
Well, right now, our goal is to be able to at least have the parktest.net, which doesn't give any prediction. That's available online. That's deployed. So we are right now recruiting, collecting data from China as well as Bangladesh. So we are rapidly collecting data. We are labeling some part of that video by neurologists to build the algorithm. And in the meantime, building the prediction engine as well as the feedback page based on the input from the neurologist. I hope that answers your question.
Okay, so you are working with some neurologists today, and I'm assuming they are US-based neurologists, right?
At this point, yes, but we are working with a company from India where we potentially could be also working with neurologists from India.
Okay, great.
Thank you. Patrick, would you like to go next?
Yeah, so I have a bit of a question on trust. So like I know the older family members that I have in my close and distant family distrust technology. And so I'm wondering if there's any like pushback, or like have you even like considered how you deal with that with older patients? Do they trust, a automatic, thing through a web browser that gives them feedback of, do they trust that as they would a physical person? And I know like physicians probably like this approach because it kind of offloads some work and kind of weeds out people that don't necessarily have a certain positive diagnosis. But I think that like in regards to the patient, how do you like, I don't know. I mean, it's kind of a loaded question, but like, are you thinking about what patients think about these fully automated approaches and the kind of disconnect from human interaction?
Right, so the answers are very different depending on which project you pick. For Parkinson, I think people trust it very much because they want to get metric. They want to be able to understand what's going on with the severity of the tremor because it's all the time, it's debilitating. They cannot do any of the tasks. So they really want to get more metric. So on that note, they really trust the technology. But the problem is many individuals are so severe, they can use a computer. So I think in this case, this will not be applicable to them. And how do you communicate that information to the patient? It's difficult. So that's one difficulty we encounter. On the other project on aging and engaging, I think that's a project we have gotten some pushback from older adults. I know that Sherry is in the call. I saw her. I think she would have some pushback too, that some people said, I don't want to talk to an agent. I don't want to talk to a humanoid. I don't want to talk to a real person. And that's completely fine. I think we need to respect their decision. Some older adults were comfortable because they're immobile. They cannot leave home and be able to talk to somebody. And if there is something at home, they could practice and know, okay, you know what, I am becoming overly negative with the way I'm speaking or looking at life, or I'm not taking turns. So getting that some kind of feedback at home, at the privacy of their home, is valuable to some segment of the population.
Great, and I have one quick follow-up to that, if I could ask. In regards to like OpenPose and OpenFace, I've used them quite a lot in my research, and when they work amazingly, as you pointed out. But when they don't, it could be a complete disaster. So, do you think that as these kind of systems become more mainstream and commercialized, and like the disclaimers of it being just a opinion tool and not like an actual diagnosis kind of go away? Do you really think that we could get to like fully automated clinicians versus something where a human is always in the loop? Because like I feel like when you upload your video data and your speech data to this black box and it gives you some kind of recommendation, that's one thing. But I personally, as a researcher, as someone that knows how these things work, I would rather have someone in the loop just validating that the data is accurate, that it's not like classifying a face on a poster behind the person and things like that.
Right. I mean, that's a great question. And we have thought about that question greatly, right? So there's a benefit to having fully automated, but do you want to trust technology with this? How should you bring a human in the loop, and who's going to pay for that? And a few things we considered. I mean, maybe we can look at the zip code. If it's a fairly remote place where they have no hospitals in the 200 miles, in that way, perhaps we can push a bit more. on the automated system versus in a place like Rochester, we have a great medical system where we can be a bit more subtle the way the technology is being used. So I would use that depending on the socioeconomic status, the geography, the environment, because Parkinson is linked with environment as well. So by using all that equation and use that equation to drive, okay, how far do you want to go in the spectrum? Like when should human come in and when should you trust technology and what expense?
I have one last question, perhaps. You're automating the data collection for if I understand correctly, one of the reasons, there's a couple of ways in which this can be used. It can understand the doctors can use it to understand the disease progression, right? And then by understanding disease progressions, they can fine tune. The other one is perhaps prioritizing or telling people that they should go and test. Actually, I have two questions. The first one is, have you considered automated fine tuning? So if you're able to collect all of this data, maybe it is possible to actually run clinical trials where you're not anymore blocked on the patient seeing the doctor. You have so much data, and that can be used to automatically fine-tune, provide a better dosage for people. You're collecting much more data than is probably available. And have you considered that?
I think the drug companies would love for me to do that because that would validate their drug. But I think my neurologist friend may not like that solution too much. What my neurologist friend told me that what you mentioned is a good pitch for a drug company. Like if I'm building levodopa, and I want to know how well the medicine is working, how the fine dosage should be fine-tuned automatically. I think they're the one who may like this kind of work. If I want to work with neurologists, then I think I want to have a design where I'm empowering them, where they're still working 8 hours per day, but they're serving a lot more patients in an effective way. So there's a tension as to who's funding the work, who am I working with, and what solution am I going to go for?
In the longer run, but I can imagine, it's a little bit more of a philosophical question, but in the longer run, you want to be able to automate and free up their time to look at sort of rarer and rarer diseases. Going back to the beginning of your talk, where you're saying, look, we want to be able to shrink the time. And basically what we try to address is the diseases that impact most people first. But this is where you probably need a lot of human judgment. But it's probably for the longer run. So I have another question, actually. When you were saying that a certain type of diagnosis, also you're talking about equity. And when you talk about equity, there's also a question of sample sizes. If this starts being used for prioritizing patients, look, this AI determined that this person has a higher probability, and so we should move them up the queue for them to get treatment. What are your concerns, and what do you think are the approaches that need to be put in place to address, to be equitable in rolling out technologies like this?
Yeah, that's a great question. Right now, what we're working with a company where we're thinking about adding this as part of a yearly physical. You go there to a physical, maybe you can do this as one-time thing, and we can keep track of the data. And if they're showing signs, we can ask them or refer them to a neurologist. So that's the framework in which we are planning on. And we can measure the severity of the symptom, and I will say that there may be cases where it will make mistakes. And if it does, we need to really work on a language that doesn't really scare anybody off and prioritize one person versus another. And then going back to what I said, Patrick, that maybe we can look into where they're located. And depending on the socioeconomic structure, as well as the location, the environmental factor, we can add a priority based on the variables that everybody feels comfortable with.
Very complex, but very important problem. Thank you very much, Ehsan, for a very exciting talk.